Hello, Fish Faithful. This is Marlins Daily on the Fan Arch Network. I am Kurt Semder, and for the first time in 2 weeks, we are talking about a Marlins win. You knew it was eventually going to happen, but man, it feels good, doesn't it? It feels good after a huge win at home against the Phillies last night. A game that, for 8 innings looked like it was going to just go the same way that the previous 12 had gone. The Marlins played a game that was looking very similar to what we had seen before, jumping out to a big lead against Zach Wheeler, or at least getting out to a lead, then giving that lead up. Then the bullpen comes in after Tyler Phillips can only go 5 innings, 75 pitches, probably could have stretched him out more. We've heard some comments about that before, but go to the bullpen. Bullpen gives up the lead, and you're just feeling like, okay, more of the same like we've seen for the last 12 games, that the Marlins are going to drop another game. And instead, what happened in the ninth inning was the Marlins of June returned. The Marlins of June showed up at the best possible time, facing one of the best closers in baseball, possibly the best in the National League outside of Mason Miller right now and Johan Duran of the Phillies. Down 7-5, you didn't give this team a lot of chances to get this thing done. I know I didn't with Jacob Marcy leading off the inning, but he came through with a big hit. Otto Lopez followed up with a hit, and it just kind of rolled from there. And when I say the Marlins of June showed up, they started doing all the things that helped them be successful and win 20 games that month. They had great at-bats in the inning. Nobody struck out. They were hitting to contact. They were finding the holes in the infield, getting those big base hits. They had aggressive base running. Otto Lopez didn't waste any time stealing second base after getting the hit and putting it into a second and third situation there. Those timely hits, as we mentioned, didn't wait till the very end as Heriberto Hernandez continues. I mean, he's been playing really well during this losing streak, and it's kind of gone overlooked. But he came through with the huge hit to tie this game up. And, this team just fed off of each other in that ninth inning, and you can kind of see it start building as that inning progressed. For a game where the team had 14 hits overall, 6 guys had a multi-hit game, that's what you want. And look, they really continue to just do the little things. No better example of that than Xavier Edwards with the, bunt to third, that really all you're looking to do there is advance the runners from first and second, and he ends up getting a base hit out of it to load the bases with nobody out. And if Liam Hicks, if his chopper to first was a couple of inches higher over the head of Bryce Harper instead of being just low enough that he was able to grab it, the game probably ends there. But it didn't matter because Griffin Conine comes up big at the very next at bat, looping the game-winning walk-off single to right, and you could feel the team exhale. You could feel the pressure kind of go away. This team had been weighed down by this losing streak, and I've mentioned it, that all that confidence and everything they had built up had gone away. Maybe they found a little bit of it. Maybe they remembered what got them to the point where we were starting to talk about them as a playoff team and starting to talk about them as contending for October baseball. Yes, it's one game, and one win does not erase a 12-game losing streak, but it's certainly better than a 13-game losing streak. And it was a dramatic win, and it's not the kind of game where I could just simply say they were lucky or, they won that game. They got it done. In the last show I said, bad teams find ways to lose and good teams find ways to win. They found a way to win this game. And down 7-5 against someone like Duran, they didn't have a lot of chances. No, I don't think anybody really thought they were going to be able to get this done. They get the 8-7 win. And it's huge. It's huge for them. They have a big week here ahead of them with games that can still kind of, help them to turn this season around. There's a lot of baseball still left to be played. But had they not made this comeback, we would be having a very, very different conversation here today on Marlins Daily, that's for sure. As this team gets it done in the clutch, and it was great. I mean, you could tell, I mean, for a stadium that, look, it is what it is. Not a lot of fans showed up. Most of the fans that were in the ballpark last night were Phillies fans. They got to see their team blow the lead, something that they hadn't done this season. They got to see them blow the lead against a Marlins team that was dead in the water heading into that ninth inning. But they picked themselves up, and they got it done. And great for them. Great for them. You got to feel great for that team. That you could see just how happy they were, and you could just see all the pressure and that 12-game losing streak just go away. And everything's now feels much better. And now this team feels like maybe they can go on a little bit of a run. And we'll talk about what could happen next with this team as we go forward here. But the win couldn't have come at a better time. As we've mentioned, the trade deadline is now just a week away. And, there were a lot of news and notes that came out about what the Marlins plan to do at the deadline prior to the game. And they are very interesting as far as what this team is planning on doing going forward. So, when we talk about what we heard, Craig Mish, who does a great job on the Marlins broadcast, reported before the game that this team doesn't intend to be buyers at the trade deadline. They're not looking to add guys on expiring contracts. They're not looking to take on any more money. But they're not in full sell mode either. And that's kind of what we had been talking about on this show, about what could happen with this team. Guys who we've mentioned, whether it be Sandy Alcantara, whether it's Yuri Perez or Max Meyer, Joe Mack, just some of the names that were mentioned in Craig's report. These are people that won't be traded. These are people that the Marlins see as building blocks and people that they want to have on this team going forward. And that's a good way to look at it, because those are some names that you really want to have on your team. And there's some other ones that were mentioned there that I think they want to have as part of this core and as part of this group moving forward, and hopefully trying to contend, if not this year, next year. However, not in full sell mode doesn't mean that they're not selling. The names that we have heard are the names we've talked about here. Pete Fairbanks as closer has struggled for the Marlins, but there are a lot of teams out there who think that he can help them. I would expect him to get moved by next Monday. There's been a lot of talk about the young pitcher Braxton Garrett, who struggled at times when he's been called up, but he's been doing very, very well at AAA. And, there's been a lot of talk and reports that maybe a change of scenery might be good for him. He's getting a lot of interest, so he could be a player that's on the move. Some of those bullpen arms that we've talked about, whether it's Anthony Bender or John King, those kind of guys. There's even been a couple little rumors, a couple of people talking about Liam Hicks, who we talked about on this show last week, could be a guy who the Marlins could afford to trade due to their depth at catcher and what they feel like they can do at first base and DH. They've got some people on the way up. So there's going to be some movement with this team and with some of the guys on this team. But what basically it seems like the Marlins are going to try to do here at the deadline is add young talent, inexpensive talent that can help them in the future. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to trade some of their bigger players, but it means that they're going to kind of identify some players on some other teams who they can kind of help them fill some of their holes, but they can also get some players that are going to help them moving forward, which is what you want your GM to do. And I think that's what Peter Bendix is being given the opportunity to do at this deadline. And, there are a lot of teams in the race, and there's not as many teams that are kind of out of it. So there's a good opportunity here for him to make some moves. Do I think with 100% certainty that Sandy is not getting traded? No. I think they really still should take phone calls and see what the offers are, especially when we talk about what we're going to talk about in a minute about some of the guys who are getting some interest from other teams. But I understand them not wanting to trade him, and then, okay, bring him back on the team option next year, pay him his money, if there is a next year, of course, with the MLB lockout that's looming. But if you want him to be the guy who's going to be at the top of your rotation next year, I'm all for it. I think it's a great idea to go for it. And he's a Marlin through and through. Keep him on the team. And some of the other guys we mentioned are building blocks that you can move with going forward. So, look, not full sell mode, which, Marlins fans, we're used to this team being in full sell mode at pretty much all times. So good to see them at least not going in that direction for once. But what has happened with everything that's been going on here is some of the players that are getting interest from other teams are interesting and are worth talking about. And one of those guys is all-star shortstop Otto Lopez, who some reports came out yesterday that there were teams calling the Marlins about the availability of Otto Lopez and Xavier Edwards. The Yankees and the Red Sox, two of the teams that were mentioned, teams that were in need of middle infield or center field help. Cody Bellinger just went down with an injury for the Yankees. The Red Sox without Trevor Story. There's injuries. They need to fill their gaps. And those teams are doing their due diligence, calling and seeing what the Marlins want to do with those guys. And that's fair. And the Marlins have to say no unless, and when I say unless, I mean there's got to be a huge, huge haul for players of that caliber and for players like that who are under team control for another couple of years. Under no circumstance do I think the Marlins should be shopping those players. I don't think they should be actively trying to trade those players. I think Peter Bendick should not be doing that. But he should be listening to see if one of these teams, especially when you talk about teams like the Red Sox and Yankees arguing or going back and forth trying to get a player, see if one of these teams is willing to give you a king's ransom for one of these guys. Because you could change your franchise in a second if you decide to make the right move. If you're able to pick up, kind of what we were talking about, what Sandy might be able to bring back. When you talk about whether it's a major league ready talent or more than one major league ready talent and a top prospect on top of that. They do have depth in the middle of the infield. And I'm just approaching this from the point of view of what if the Marlins did decide to make this trade? Would it be crushing? Would it be crushing for this season? Probably, if you lost somebody like Lopez or Edwards. But going forward, depending on what you brought back, it could be the right move. I don't think it was, though. I think these guys are part of your plan going forward, and I think you have to resist the temptation to trade one of these players. Otto Lopez has proven this year that he is one of the leaders of this team. He is the engine that drives this team forward, and he is one of the guys who's the heart of the lineup. And Xavier Edwards is right there with him. And losing either of those guys, I think, would just be a signal to the rest of the team that this season is over. So I wouldn't trade either of them. But I'd listen, and I'd see if the Red Sox or Yankees or someone else was willing to really blow you out of the water for one of these guys, if that's the case. But I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think either player has the game-changing ability for one of these other teams where they would want to make that kind of move. I don't think either of these guys would get you back a Tariq Skubal type return, that sort of thing. And I'm not saying that you would need to get that back if you wanted to trade them, but in the position the Marlins are in right now, for guys like them who are cheap, who are effective, who are loved by your fan base and loved by the rest of the team, you really need to be overwhelmed in order to move one of them. So, yes, let teams inquire, let teams call about them, but I fully expect Otto Lopez and Xavier Edwards to both be on this team after the trade deadline. And the Marlins have a big week ahead. Like I said, games with the Phillies, games with the Mets. They got a chance. They're right there, still in the wild card race, sure. And again, a good week can turn this whole thing around. But in order to do that, you're going to need these guys on the team. So, yes. And you want to put these things to bed as quickly as you can, too, with a young team like this. You don't want trade rumors hanging over them in these big games, in these crucial games. So, yes, take the calls, but don't do anything crazy. Don't do anything wildly outrageous that's going to hurt the future of this team. I think that's really the big thing for them. And with that in mind, we go into the second game of this series. And, there had been talk and there were feelings that perhaps this might be one of Sandy Alcantara's last starts as a Marlin. I don't think that's the case anymore. Instead, he's going to be taking the mound facing Aaron Nola in a game that, I think years ago would have been, a primetime ace versus ace matchup. Aaron Nola has fallen off in recent starts and in recent years. Sandy has had his struggles as well. But this is going to be an old school matchup between two very good pitchers. And Sandy's looking to help the Marlins get back on a winning streak here and put two games together and get a series win against the Phillies before you head into the finale on Wednesday. And if you want anybody on the mound to do it, it's him. That is for sure. And like I said, I don't expect this to be his last start. He'll probably get another start against the Mets, even if he were to be somehow traded. But this is a game for the Marlins. They've got to build off the momentum they got off this walk-off win. They got to keep things moving in the right direction. And not going to be easy against a Phillies team that is probably not going to be too happy after this loss. And probably going to come into this game looking to get on the board early and often and put this game out of reach in the early innings. And we know Sandy does have some struggles in those first couple of innings of a game. If they can get through that and let him settle in, Sandy is the kind of pitcher who will throw a lot of pitches if possible, and he's the kind of guy who can give this bullpen a day off that they desperately need as well. At least give most of these guys the chance to get back to full strength. So we'll see what happens in the second game of this series. If it's as dramatic a win as we got in the first one, that's fine. Hopefully it's a win nonetheless. But, Marlins fans, you got to be feeling a little bit better. You got to be feeling a little bit better because the last 2 weeks have been rough for the team, for the fans, for everyone. And now things, at least for one day, are looking a little bit brighter heading into tonight's game. And hopefully things are going to be looking better going on the rest of the week. So we'll continue to follow the trade deadline rumors, and we'll continue to follow this team as everything plays out this week. Marlins and Phillies later tonight. And again, Marlins Daily, a new episode comes out tomorrow right here on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe so you know exactly when these pop up for you. And I can't wait to talk to you about tonight's game. So we'll see you later. We'll see you tomorrow on Marlins Daily.